It is 3:17 in the morning on March 7th, 2026, and I have not slept. I have been sitting at this desk for the last 4 hours with my Bible open to Revelation chapter 6, a printed copy of the Book of Enoch open beside it, and 3 different commentaries stacked on the floor. And I need to tell you something before I go any further. I almost did not make this video, not because I was afraid of the topic, but because what I found tonight, what I found in the text is so precise, so layered, and so convergent that I sat here for a long time just staring at it, asking myself if I was seeing what I thought I was seeing, and then I went back and checked it again, and it was still there. So here is why you are watching this right now. A blood moon occurred, a real, verifiable, astronomically documented blood moon. And if you have been paying attention to the prophetic calendar, you already know that blood moons do not just happen. They have a pattern, they have a history, and more importantly, they have a biblical sequence that follows them. Not before them, after them. That is what nobody is talking about tonight. Everyone wants to talk about the blood moon itself, the sign in the sky, the red lunar eclipse that Joel chapter 2 verse 31 describes when he writes, "The sun shall be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes." People quote that verse, and then they stop. They treat the blood moon like it is the event, like seeing it means the story is over. But the blood moon is not the destination. The blood moon is the starting gun. And what I found tonight, working through Revelation chapter 6 and then cross-referencing it with a passage in the Book of Enoch that the Apostle Jude actually quotes directly in his letter, and then running both of those against what Irenaeus of Lyon wrote in the 2nd century, is a sequence, a specific numbered ordered sequence of 7 events that follow a blood moon sign. And the terrifying thing, the thing that kept me up until 3 in the morning, is that Enoch and Revelation do not just agree on the events, they agree on the order. Now, I know what some of you are thinking right now. You are thinking, the Book of Enoch is not in my Bible, and you are right. It is not in the Protestant canon, it is not in the Catholic canon, but here's what you need to understand before we go any further, because this matters for everything that follows. The Book of Enoch is an ancient Jewish text that was found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. It was read and respected by the earliest Christians, and the Apostle Jude, writing under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, quotes it directly. In Jude verse 14 and 15, he writes, "Enoch, the 7th from Adam, prophesied about these, saying, Behold, the Lord comes with 10,000s of his holy ones to execute judgment on all." That is a direct quote from 1 Enoch chapter 1 verse 9. So when Jude, writing canonical scripture, reaches into this ancient text and pulls from it as a prophetic witness, he is telling us something. He is telling us that this text carries genuine prophetic weight, not equal to scripture. I want to be clear about that, but not dismissible either. And when that text lines up with Revelation, with a precision that I'm going to show you tonight, verse by verse, sequence by sequence, we have to take that seriously. And then there is Irenaeus. Let me tell you who Irenaeus of Lyon was, because most modern churches have forgotten him entirely. Irenaeus was a bishop in the 2nd century who sat under the teaching of Polycarp, and Polycarp sat under the teaching of the Apostle John himself, the same John who wrote the Book of Revelation. So when Irenaeus writes about the sequence of end-time events, he is not speculating from a distance. He is working from a tradition that flows directly from the man who received the vision on the island of Patmos. And what Irenaeus wrote about the signs that follow a heavenly disruption, I am going to show you tonight, matches both Revelation and Enoch in a way that should stop you cold. So let me tell you what we are going to cover tonight. We are going to go through 7 biblical events that follow in sequence after a blood moon sign. We are going to see how Revelation chapter 6 lays them out. We are going to see how the Book of Enoch, quoted by Jude, confirms the same sequence. We are going to hear what Irenaeus wrote about this specific progression. And we are going to do a word study in the original Greek that reveals something the English translation has been softening for centuries. And then at the very end, I'm going to show you the 7th event, the one that ties all of this together, the one that I have been sitting with for the last hour, just trying to process what it means for right now, for this moment, for March of 2026. I'm going to hold that one until the end because it changes the way you read everything that comes before it, and I need you to have the full context before I show it to you. But before we go any further, I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer me in the comments right now. Have you ever had someone walk you through what comes after the blood moon? Not the blood moon itself, what comes after it? Because in all the prophecy content I have consumed over the years, all the videos, all the books, all the sermons, I have never once heard someone lay out the post-blood moon sequence the way the text actually presents it. If that is new to you tonight, if nobody has ever shown you this before, I need to know. Drop a comment right now and tell me, because what I am about to show you is something that most modern pulpits have never addressed, and I need to know who is hearing this for the first time. Now, let me set the stage. The blood moon that we are anchoring to tonight is not a metaphor. It is not a spiritual symbol disconnected from the physical world. Joel chapter 2 is describing a real astronomical event, a lunar eclipse so total and so red that the moon appears to bleed, and Joel places it in a specific prophetic context. He says it comes before the great and awesome day of the Lord. The Hebrew word translated as before here is lifnei, which means in front of or in the presence of. It is a word of proximity, of imminence. Joel is not saying the blood moon happens years before the day of the Lord. He is saying it happens right at the threshold, right at the door. And then Revelation chapter 6 opens the sixth seal. And look at what it says. I want to read this slowly because every word matters. Revelation chapter 6, verses 12 through 14. When he opened the sixth seal, I looked, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth. The full moon became like blood, and the stars of the sky fell to the earth as the fig tree sheds its winter fruit when shaken by a gale. The sky vanished like a scroll that is being rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. Now, the blood moon appears in the sixth seal, and the sixth seal is not the end, it is a marker. It is a threshold event, and what follows the sixth seal is a sequence, a specific ordered, numbered sequence of events that Revelation then walks us through in chapters 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and beyond. And here is what I found tonight that I cannot stop thinking about. The Book of Enoch in chapters 80 through 90 describes what scholars call the animal apocalypse, and in that section, Enoch lays out a sequence of events that follow a sign in the heavens. And when I put those two sequences side by side tonight, the order matched, not loosely, not approximately. The order matched with a precision that made me put my pen down and just sit there. So that is where we are going. 7 events, 2 ancient witnesses, 1 second-century church father who knew the man who knew John, and a Greek word study that is going to change the way you read the sixth seal forever. Stay with me, because we are just getting started. Let me give you the foundation you need before we start walking through the sequence. Because if you do not understand the context of blood moons in biblical history, the 7 events we are about to examine will not carry their full weight, and I need them to carry their full weight tonight. Blood moons have appeared throughout history at moments of profound prophetic significance, and I am not talking about random lunar eclipses. I am talking about blood moons that fall on Jewish feast days, on the appointed times that God himself established in Leviticus chapter 23. The Hebrew word for these appointed times is moed, and it means a fixed appointment, a meeting time set in advance. So when a blood moon falls on a moed, on one of God's own appointed meeting times, that is not coincidence. That is the calendar of heaven intersecting with the calendar of earth. Now, the pattern of blood moon tetrads falling on Jewish feast days has appeared at some of the most significant moments in Jewish and world history. In 1492 and 1493, a tetrad of blood moons fell on Passover and the Feast of Tabernacles across 2 consecutive years. That was the year the Jewish people were expelled from Spain. 150,000 people driven from their homes in one of the most devastating moments of Jewish history since the destruction of the temple. And the blood moons marked it. They framed it. They appeared on the appointed times as if heaven itself was bearing witness to what was happening on earth. Then in 1949 and 1950, another tetrad, falling again on Passover and Tabernacles. That was the year after Israel declared statehood, the year the nation that had not existed for nearly 2,000 years suddenly existed again. Ezekiel 37 had described it, the valley of dry bones coming together, flesh returning to what had been dead, and the blood moons appeared on the feast days as witnesses. Then again in 1967 and 1968, another tetrad on the feast days. That was the year of the Six-Day War, the year Jerusalem returned to Jewish control for the first time since 70 AD, the year the city that Jesus wept over in Luke chapter 19, verse 41, came back under the authority of the people he had wept for. So when we talk about a blood moon as a prophetic marker, we are not talking about superstition. We are talking about a pattern that has repeated itself at moments of world-altering significance, a pattern that God himself seems to have built into the astronomical calendar. And Joel chapter 2, Acts chapter 2, and Revelation chapter 6 all point to this same phenomenon as a sign of what is coming. Now here is where I need to do the word study I promised you, because the English translation of Revelation chapter 6 verse 12 has been softening something for centuries, and I need you to see what the original Greek actually says. The English reads, "The full moon became like blood." Simple enough. The moon turned red. But the Greek word translated as became here is egeneto, and egeneto does not just mean changed appearance. It comes from the root genomai, which means to come into being, to be born into a new state, to transition from one mode of existence to another. It is the same root used in John chapter 1 verse 14 when it says the Word became flesh. The Word did not just appear to be flesh. The Word transitioned into a new mode of existence. The Word was born into flesh. So when Revelation says the moon egeneto like blood, it is not just describing a visual phenomenon. It is describing a transition, a threshold crossing, the moon entering a new state. And that word, egeneto, appears at the beginning of a sequence. It is the marker that says something has crossed over, something has changed, and what follows is not a return to normal. What follows is the sequence. And that is exactly what both Revelation and Enoch understand. The blood moon is not a standalone event. It is a transition marker. It is the moment when the sequence begins. Now let me introduce you to the first textual thread from the Book of Enoch that we are going to follow tonight, because I want you to understand what kind of document we are dealing with before I start pulling from it. The Book of Enoch is divided into 5 major sections. The section most relevant to our study tonight is called the Book of the Luminaries, which covers chapters 72 through 82, and the Animal Apocalypse, which covers chapters 85 through 90. The Book of the Luminaries deals specifically with the movements of the sun, moon, and stars as prophetic indicators, and the Animal Apocalypse presents all of human history from Adam to the end of the age, using animals as symbolic figures in a way that scholars have recognized as remarkably parallel to the symbolic language of Daniel and Revelation. Now, Enoch chapter 80 verse 2 through 8 describes a time when the luminaries, the heavenly lights, begin to deviate from their appointed courses, and the language Enoch uses is striking. He says the moon will change its order and not appear at its appointed time, and then he describes a sequence of earthly disruptions that follow this heavenly deviation, disruptions that come in a specific order. And when I laid that sequence next to Revelation chapter 6 through chapter 9 tonight, I had to stop and read it 3 times, because the order matched. Now I want to be careful here. I am not saying Enoch is predicting the same events as Revelation in a one-to-one prophetic correspondence. What I am saying is that both texts, drawing from the same ancient prophetic tradition, present the same understanding of how heaven and earth interact. Both texts understand that a disruption in the heavenly luminaries, a blood moon, a darkened sun, a falling of stars, is not the climax of the story. It is the opening of a sequence, and both texts present that sequence in the same order. And Irenaeus of Lyon, writing in the 2nd century, confirms this understanding. Let me tell you what he wrote. In his great work Against Heresies, Book 5, Chapter 25, Irenaeus is commenting on the signs of the end times, and he writes about the progression of events that follows the heavenly signs. He says, and I am paraphrasing from his Latin here, that the disruption of the heavenly order is the signal that the appointed time has arrived, and that what follows is not random but proceeds according to a divine order that was established before the foundation of the world. Now remember who Irenaeus is. He is not a medieval theologian speculating from a distance. He is a 2nd century bishop who sat under Polycarp, who sat under John. He is working from a tradition that flows directly from the man who received the revelation on Patmos, and he is telling us that the sequence that follows the heavenly signs is ordered. It is not chaotic, it proceeds according to a divine plan. That is exactly what we are going to trace tonight. So let me now set up the framework for the 7 events. And I want to be clear about something before I start. These 7 events are not my invention. They are not my interpretation. They are drawn directly from the text of Revelation chapters 6 through 11, confirmed by parallel language in the Book of Enoch, and understood by Irenaeus as a sequential progression. I am not adding anything to the text tonight. I am showing you what is already there. The 7 events that follow the blood moon sign in the biblical sequence are these. First, a great shaking of the earth and the heavens. Second, the sealing and the protecting of a remnant. Third, silence and the preparation of judgment. Fourth, the sounding of warnings across the earth. Fifth, the release of spiritual forces that have been restrained. Sixth, the gathering of nations and the convergence of powers. And seventh, the event that I am holding until the end, the one that ties all of this together. the one that Enoch and Revelation both describe in language so specific that when you see it, you will understand why I have been sitting here since before midnight. Now, I want to pause here and tell you something about the first event, because the great shaking is not just an earthquake, and the English translation, as good as it is, does not fully capture what the Greek is describing. But before I get into that, I need to ask you something. Has anyone in your church, in your small group, in any sermon you have ever sat under, walked you through this sequence? Not just the blood moon, not just the signs in the sky, but the ordered sequence of what comes after? Leave a comment right now and be honest with me, because what I am about to show you in the next section is something that most modern churches have never addressed from the pulpit, and I need to know who is coming into this with fresh eyes tonight, because if you are hearing this sequence for the first time, I need you to stay with me through all 7. Do not skip ahead. Do not jump to the end. The sequence matters, the order matters, and by the time we get to the 7th event, you are going to understand why. Now let me also tell you something about the real-world anchor for tonight, because I promised you at the beginning that this is not disconnected from verifiable events. The blood moon we are examining tonight falls within a prophetically significant window, a window that connects to the Jewish calendar, to the geopolitical situation in the Middle East, and to a pattern of heavenly signs that has been building for years. And when you understand where we are on that timeline, the urgency of this sequence stops being abstract. It becomes personal. It becomes immediate. It becomes something you cannot sit with passively. So stay with me, because we are about to go into the first event. And I promise you, by the time we finish tonight, you are going to read Revelation chapter 6 through 11 differently than you ever have before. Event number 1, the great shaking. Let me read Revelation chapter 6 verses 12 through 14 again, but this time I want you to listen differently. I want you to listen not just for what is described, but for the order in which it is described, because the order is the message. When he opened the 6th seal, I looked, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth, the full moon became like blood, and the stars of the sky fell to the earth as the fig tree sheds its winter fruit when shaken by a gale. The sky vanished like a scroll that is being rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. Now, the first thing that happens after the blood moon sign is a great earthquake, a great shaking, and I need you to understand that the Greek word used here for earthquake is seismos, and seismos does not exclusively mean a geological event. It means a violent shaking, a convulsion. It is used in Matthew chapter 8 verse 24 to describe the storm on the Sea of Galilee, the same word, a violent shaking of the waters. So when Revelation uses seismos here, it is describing something that shakes everything, not just the ground, the whole created order. And look at what follows the seismos in the text. The sun goes dark, the moon turns to blood, the stars fall, the sky rolls up like a scroll, mountains and islands move. This is not a localized event. This is a comprehensive convulsion of the created order, and it all flows from the opening of the 6th seal. It all flows from the blood moon threshold moment we identified in the last section. Now here is where Enoch enters the picture in a way that stopped me cold tonight. In 1 Enoch chapter 80 verse 4 through 6, Enoch writes about a time when the earth will be shaken from its foundations, and then he describes what follows that shaking in a specific order. He says the holy ones, the angels, will be disturbed. He says the great ones will be afraid. And then he says a separation will begin, a dividing of those who belong to the light from those who belong to the darkness. Now look at what Revelation does immediately after the 6th seal shaking. Revelation chapter 7 verse 1 says, "After this I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds of the earth, that no wind might blow on earth or sea or against any tree." The shaking is followed immediately by angelic activity, by a holding back, by a restraining. And then in verse 2, another angel appears with the seal of the living God, and he cries out to the 4 angels, "Do not harm the earth or the sea or the trees, until we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads." So the first event, the great shaking, is immediately followed by the second event, the sealing and the protecting of a remnant. And both Enoch and Revelation understand this as a sequential pair. The shaking comes first, then the sealing, the disruption comes first, then the protection of those who belong to God. And Irenaeus of Lyon understood this sequence. In Against Heresies, Book 5, chapter 28, he writes about the tribulation that precedes the coming of Christ, and he says, and I am translating from his Latin, that God does not abandon his own in the time of shaking, that the sealing of the servants of God is the divine answer to the disruption of the created order, that the shaking is not evidence of God's absence. It is the context in which God's protection becomes most visible. That is event number 1 and event number 2 working together. The shaking and the sealing, they are a pair. They are inseparable in the text, and both Enoch and Revelation present them in the same order. Now let me dwell on the sealing for a moment because this is one of the most misunderstood passages in all of prophetic scripture. Revelation chapter 7 verses 4 through 8 describes 144,000 people being sealed from the 12 tribes of Israel, and there has been enormous debate about who these people are. Are they literal Jewish believers? Are they symbolic of the complete church? Are they a special end-time remnant? I am not going to resolve that debate tonight. What I want you to see is the function of the sealing, because the function is clear regardless of the identity of the sealed. The function is protection in the midst of judgment. The function is the marking of those who belong to God before the judgments are released. And that function is exactly what Enoch describes in his sequence, the separation of the holy ones from the judgment that is coming. And here is something that I think is deeply important for where we are right now. The sealing happens before the trumpets sound, before the bowls are poured out, before the great judgments of Revelation chapters 8 through 16 are released. The sealing is God's act of protection that precedes the outpouring of judgment, and that tells us something about the character of God. He does not release judgment without first securing his own. He does not shake the earth without first sealing those who belong to him. That is the God of Revelation chapter 7. That is the God who says in Isaiah chapter 26 verse 20, "Come, my people, enter your chambers and shut your doors behind you. Hide yourselves for a little while until the fury has passed by." Now I want to pause here and ask you something directly, because this matters for how you receive the rest of what I am going to show you tonight. The sealing in Revelation chapter 7 is not automatic, it is not passive. The text describes servants of God being sealed. Servants, people who are actively in relationship with God, people who are known by him, people who belong to him. And so the question I need to ask you, and I need you to sit with this before we go to event number 3, is this: are you among those who would be sealed? Not in a theological abstract sense, in a personal, immediate, right now sense. Is your heart right with God tonight? Because the sequence we are walking through is not a spectator sport. It is not information you consume and then set aside. It is a sequence that is either happening to you or happening around you. And which of those it is depends entirely on whether you are among the servants of God who are sealed before the judgments begin. I'm going to come back to that question at the end of tonight, but I need you to hold it now. Hold it while we go through the rest of the sequence. Event number 3, silence and the preparation of judgment. This one is brief in the text, but enormous in its implications. Revelation chapter 8 verse 1 says, "When the Lamb opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour." Silence in heaven for half an hour. Now, if you have read Revelation before, you know that heaven in this book is anything but silent. It is full of the voices of angels, the songs of the 4 living creatures, the declarations of the 24 elders, the thunder and lightning from the throne. Heaven in Revelation is a place of constant, overwhelming, glorious sound. And then suddenly, silence. The Greek word here is sige, and sige means complete stillness, total quiet, the kind of silence that falls when something of enormous weight is about to happen. It is the silence of a courtroom when the judge is about to pronounce sentence. It is the silence of a battlefield in the moment before the order to advance is given. It is not peaceful silence. It is pregnant silence. It is the silence of preparation. And what follows the silence? Revelation chapter 8, verses 2 through 5. 7 angels are given 7 trumpets, and another angel comes and stands at the altar with a golden censer. And he is given much incense to offer with the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar before the throne. And the smoke of the incense, with the prayers of the saints, rose before God from the hand of the angel. Then the angel took the censer and filled it with fire from the altar and threw it on the earth. And there were peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. So the silence is the moment when the prayers of the saints are gathered and presented before God. The silence is the moment when heaven pauses to receive the accumulated intercession of God's people. And then from that silence, judgment is prepared and released. Now look at what Enoch says about this. In 1 Enoch chapter 47, verse 1 through 2, Enoch writes, "In those days the prayers of the righteous ascended into heaven, and the blood of the righteous from the earth before the Lord of spirits. And the holy ones who dwell in the heavens above were asking and petitioning and praying on behalf of the blood of the righteous. And the prayer of the righteous was heard before the Lord of spirits, the prayers of the righteous ascending to heaven, the holy ones in heaven interceding, and then judgment being prepared. That is the same sequence. That is the same understanding of what the silence means. The silence is not absence. The silence is the moment when heaven is listening, when the prayers of God's people are being gathered and weighed and answered. And Irenaeus understood this too. He wrote that the prayers of the martyrs and the saints are not lost, that they accumulate before the throne of God, that they are the fuel of the final judgment, that when God acts in the last days, he acts in response to the cries of his people. He acts because the prayers have been heard. So event number 3 is not passive. It is not just a dramatic pause in the narrative. It is the moment when the prayers of every believer who has ever cried out to God are gathered together and presented before the throne. And then the judgment that follows is the answer to those prayers. Think about that for a moment. The judgments of Revelation are not arbitrary. They are not random acts of divine violence. They are the answer to the prayers of the saints. They are God saying, I heard you, I have not forgotten, and now I am acting. Now, I want to pause here and tell you something about the comment I need from you right now, because I have been teaching through these first 3 events, and I want to know which one is hitting you the hardest. Is it the shaking? Is it the sealing? Is it the silence and the prayers ascending? Tell me in the comments right now, which of these 3 events is speaking most directly to you tonight? Because the one that moved you is probably the one God is using to say something specific to you. And what comes next, events 4 and 5, builds directly on whichever of these 3 you are feeling most deeply. So drop a comment, tell me which one, and then stay with me, because event number 4 is where the sequence starts to get very specific and very urgent and very connected to where we are right now in March of 2026. Because event number 4 is the sounding of warnings across the earth. And when I show you what the first 4 trumpets of Revelation chapter 8 actually describe, and then show you the parallel in Enoch, and then show you what Irenaeus said about the purpose of these warnings, you are going to understand something about the mercy of God that most prophecy teachers never talk about. Because the trumpets are not just judgment, they are warnings. They are God's final mercy before the full weight of judgment falls. And the fact that they come in sequence, that they escalate in intensity, that they give the earth time to respond, tells us something about the heart of the God who sends them, and that is where we are going next. Stay with me. Event number 4, the sounding of warnings across the earth. And I need you to understand something before I walk you through the trumpets of Revelation chapter 8, because most people who teach on the trumpets focus almost exclusively on the destruction they bring, the hail and fire mixed with blood, the burning mountain thrown into the sea, the star called wormwood falling on the rivers. And yes, those things are in the text. I am not going to soften them or explain them away. But if you only see the destruction, you are missing the mercy that is embedded in the structure of the trumpets themselves. Here is what I mean. The first 4 trumpets of Revelation chapter 8 affect 1/3 of the earth. 1/3 of the trees are burned.